President, I rise today to speak about the August 2nd debt ceiling deadline and the proposal that will be before us very soon, developed by the Majority Leader Reid. Here we are again, debating legislation that demonstrates our fundamental differences in how we should run government. I want to quote from a recent article by Charles Krauthammer that appeared in the National Review, and I think that it says something that I've really been saying several times in the last week, that this is more than just a debt ceiling debate. It is a debate about our views of government that are so different between the parties in our country. And here's what Charles Krauthammer said. We're in the midst of a great 4-year national debate on the size and reach of government, the future of our welfare state, indeed, the nature of the social contract between citizen and state. The distinctive visions of the two parties, social democratic versus limited government, have underlain every debate on every issue since Barack Obama's inauguration: the stimulus, the auto bailouts, health care reform, financial regulation, deficit spending, everything. The debt ceiling is but the latest focus of this fundamental divide. The sausage making, he says, may be unsightly. No argument there. But the problem is not that Washington is broken, as he describes it, that ridiculous, ubiquitous cliche. The problem is that these two visions are in competition, and the definitive popular verdict has not yet been rendered. He goes on to say we're only at the midpoint. Obama won a great victory in 2008 that he took as a mandate to transform America toward European-style social democracy. The subsequent counter-revolution delivered to that project a staggering rebuke in November of 2010. And so I think that really puts a perspective, Madam President, on the debates that we have been having in the last 2 years and the debate that we are seeing now in the last few weeks. I do know that none of us want our country to go into default. Both sides can agree on that. All of us are troubled with the delay in resolving this issue. Uncertainty is not good for our economy, but a bad agreement is worse because it will have lasting impact, and it is my opinion that it will also affect our debtors with a message that we're not serious about a $14 trillion debt, and we're not going to do anything that would try to bring it down or bring down the deficits or change the entitlement programs that are a major part, more than half, of our budget. I support Speaker Boehner's bill, and I support the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act. Both of these plans, in my opinion, contain the right approach to our budget challenges. I believe the Reid plan is the wrong approach. The Reid plan contains what they say is a $2.4 trillion debt limit increase, which, if enacted, would result in the single largest increase in the debt ceiling in the history of America. In addition to this unprecedented increase, the Reid plan fails to address our current fiscal imbalance. It doesn't do anything to address the fundamental problems. It lacks any adequate enforcement, and it doesn't ensure that long-term spending cuts are carried out. There is no guarantee at all. So you raise the debt limit and you don't have anything but a promise, and that's not good enough. It's not good enough for the elected leaders of our country, and it's certainly not good enough for the American public. The debt ceiling increase in the Reid plan is not paid for. Many of the cuts outlined in his plan are illusory or hopeful. Well, hope is not a strategy, Madam President. We can hope to do away with waste, fraud, and abuse, but we can't promise it right now because we don't have it before us. If we had a bill that cuts certain amounts from certain agencies because of waste, fraud, and abuse, that would be a commitment that we could uphold. But what we have is a promise that we'll look at it. How many times have we looked at waste, fraud, and abuse in our government programs? Yes, we ought to do it, but we should not make it the basis of lifting a debt ceiling that is crushing the economy in our country. To label $1 trillion of cuts as savings from leaving Afghanistan and Iraq, which Senator Reid's proposal does, is just not credible. For one thing, we don't know what the future obstacles in Afghanistan and Iraq are. And we've got to retain a certain level of stability on the ground in Afghanistan. And I have met with Afghan leaders and women just in the last couple of weeks, and they also agree that if America leaves precipitously without knowing what the stability on the ground is, and we certainly haven't seen stability lately with the assassinations of mayors and leaders, including the half-brother of the leader of Afghanistan, that's not stability. It doesn't say that they are ready yet. So having $1 trillion of cuts could undermine our national security. We don't know that we can count on that. I hope we can. I hope we can leave with the right circumstances on the ground, but that is the only criteria that we should use, and not cutting a budget that we know is a promise and not a commitment that we are assured that we can keep. Most disturbing of all in the Reid plan, the only possible justification for a $2.4 trillion increase in borrowing authority is to avoid doing this again before the 2012 elections. Madam President, that is not a reason to make public policy. Yes, none of us would want to go through this again in the next year. It has been painful for all sides. But just saying, well, we're going to do it with promises and hope for the future is certainly not a way to address a major policy issue, and it is not going to have the credibility with the American people. So, Madam President, I believe it would be irresponsible to give the President this unprecedented additional borrowing authority without requiring the enactment of significant spending reductions and reforms. To do so would send a worse signal to the markets across the world that are shaky right now looking at this debate. But they are also looking at what the result is going to be. And who is going to win the battle about how we run our government? Is it going to be another $2 trillion? Can you imagine, Madam President, a $16 trillion debt ceiling with no commitment to actually make the cuts that would start getting us on the right path? Madam President, that is not enough, and that's why we're here at 8:45 on Saturday night debating this issue, because we are not going to give up on our principles of making sure that the fiscal responsibility of our country will be worthy of a AAA rating, will be worthy of the assuredness that if you buy a bond or a treasury note or invest in the United States of America, that it is a golden commitment, that you can count on it, that you can take it to the bank. That's what we are fighting for right now. And Madam President, I hope so much that we can come to an agreement, because we all agree that defaulting on our debt would not be a good signal to the markets. But raising the debt ceiling without the assured cuts, without caps on future year spending, is unconscionable. Now, I would hope, going forward, that we would have a balanced budget amendment that would go to the states, because most states have a balanced budget in their constitutions, and they have mostly sound fiscal policies. If we had to live with those same constraints, I believe we would not get into this kind of a situation again. So I hope that eventually we will have a balanced budget amendment that we can get 2/3 vote for and send to the states, and see if that isn't a worthy amendment to our great Constitution. But in the meantime, cut and cap is what we can do, and I hope we will. Thank you, Madam President, and I yield the floor.
Madam President, I feel compelled to come to the floor this evening to refute some of the arguments